Welcome aboard Canal Light Vessel Automatic, Whitchurch's answer to pirate radio. Sadly, it's fully legal and not a radio station. On the plus side, Tony Blackburn is not with us, and seasickness tablets are unnecessary. So settle back for the lock-in, a meandering journey, occasionally fraught with the rusty shopping trolleys that fate throws in our path as we get to know some of the people who have helped contribute to making our brilliant market town that also has a canal, where we are.
For the first edition of The Lock-In, we're joined by Steve Chapman, a man of many parts. Literally, he's an actor. You may well recognise his face, often seen walking around Whitchurch in beard and distinctive hat. No, not the pirate, but they do stunt double for each other. On Blackberry Fair Day, you'll often find him in bed. A bed being pushed up the high street. It makes no sense, but that's part of the charm. Plus, he's exceptionally lazy. Steve is one half of the duo that brought us Blackberry Fair, and he's joined us this evening for a beer and chat.
I mean, the first thing I'd say is it's the joyous thing that you're actually doing this, because we've talked about this so many times in Whitchurch, never ever done anything.
Really? I thought it was a completely original idea.
It's unfortunately,
Never been done
there's
before.
no such thing as an original idea. No, but the fact that you two guys have stepped up, and said, right, we'll do it, and you've met Laurie, and this, to me, that's what lies at the heart of all of what we're trying to do, is just work with people and work with community, and you don't know who's going to turn up.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's these random conversations in pubs or wherever, and you meet people and they go, I quite like that. And by the way, I'm a semi-pro sound engineer with a canal boat, which will also give you the idea for the title. And we can do it.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. So anyway, thanks for coming.
That's my pleasure. Nice to come to this boat.
It is. It's lovely, isn't it? So this is Steve Chapman, who is... How long have you known Steve for, Dave?
How long have I known? Oh, wow. Probably known since somewhere in the region of 4 or 5 years, maybe, yeah.
Like
Yeah, about that.
Through the Civic, basically, isn't it?
Yes, through me working at the Civic and through you working doing at the Blackberry Fair for all the time, and me sort of doing what I can. Yeah, like that, basically, isn't it?
So, Steve, being an actor, you're used to having smoke blown up your very artistic backside, I would imagine. But actually, I would say that Dave and you kind of brought me into this on the back of SOP, which is, and it's kind of expanded into something, hasn't it? Which is about trying to kind of really put community at the heart of how we live, and actually seeing the benefits that we're all granted if we all pitch in, see the strengths of each other, pull together with a common goal, whether it's business, whether it's a charity, or whether it's Whitchurch's slightly more expensive version of Glastonbury, which is kind of how I have always heard about you. And I think I used to see this guy since I came back here, just kind of walking around town quite rapidly, covered in paint with a ridiculous hat on. And then I found out it was Steve Chapman. And I think you are known as Mr. Blackberry Fair, aren't you?
Well, basically, yeah, I suppose I am. But, I hasten to add, I always try to not correct people, but say that, I'm probably the public face of Blackberry Fair. But to me, it's its ethos and its philosophy that really matters, which is that it's about us all. And in fact, when we were in the pub the other night, and Guy and crowd were sitting there drinking, and they were talking about the fair and saying, we can never find Steve. I thought about it afterwards, which I do a lot. I thought I should have said to them, actually, on the day, we are all Steve. Steve is an...
God forbid.
No, but Steve is an everyman. We're all in it together, and it's together that makes something happen. And all we've done, I've utilised in if nothing else in my life. I'm 64 now. I left school with very few results from my education.
Not even results, just literally, just didn't even qualify for it.
But it was either it was catering college or Rolls Royce, and I don't know why. Just art was my best subject by far. And I don't remember being given any other alternative. I mean, the situation at home was more difficult. But anyway, I went into catering. I got unclassified in the cookery O level, and I went back into the school to see if there was a spelling error.
I thought you could only get unclassified if you probably gave someone poisoning.
Well, I do remember the examiner coming to school and saying so that my cookery teacher said, well, I don't run an O-level syllabus. If you're going to do an O-level, you do it yourself. So my friend Frida and I did it ourselves. And when the examiner came along, she looked at our menu. She said, so who decided on what? I said, well, I was given the choice of the starter and Frida was given the choice of the main course, and I think we failed there and then because we were supposed to have made it all up ourselves. But anyway, like I said, I left school and then I went straight into catering college. I worked in a bakery for a year and a half. Then I went into an outdoor education centre and I was a cook there for 12 years. So, you know...
you were a cook for 12 years?
I was for nearly 15 years. I was a cook.
Right.
And I craved... I was brought up in North Wales in Beddgelert, which I cherish.
Where is... Because I know North Wales pretty well, and you do as well.
I know it fairly well. I want to know
where is it?
Beddgelert's right in the heart of the mountains. You couldn't be more central in Snowdonia.
Oh, beautiful.
Honestly, you go through Betws to Capel Cirrig, and then you come to a place called Penygwryd. I don't know if you're familiar with Penygwryd. There's a hotel at the top of the valley there, and it's where the mountaineers who trained for Everest in '53 all stayed there to practice. And if you go into the pub there, it's a drinkers' pub. They don't do bar snacks or anything like that. It's still set in the 50s. Same family have run it for years.
And they probably got better food up there than you would have served them.
If you book a meal, you get what's on the menu. You don't have a choice. You either have 2 courses or 3 courses, and that's what you get.
Right.
But in one of the back bars, all the people like Lord Hunt, etc., signed the ceiling, so their signatures are on the ceiling. It's a fascinating place, but so many people don't know it's there. But anyway, because long story short, you go past the hotel and then you hit the top of the valley, and you look down on the vista. Whenever they promote North Wales for holidays, that's the valley you'll see, and it's Llyn to the bottom. It's just idyllic, and I still to this day think I'd love to know what it feels like to drive over the brow of the hill and look down, see that for the first time. I mean, it still gives me a jump when I think. So imagine doing that for the first time. And anyway, Beddgelert's about 4 miles further down the valley, and I was brought up there in the 60s. My parents had moved. I forget where they moved from. I think it was Derbyshire or somewhere. They were going to go to New Zealand. Ended up in Beddgelert. My dad promptly left when I was born. Mum and Nan ran a guest house, but I was brought up in this small Welsh village. It was a very Welsh village.
So when you say small, I mean, are we thinking like a 15 people hamlet, or is
no?
It's a small...
I'd say there's probably 500 people in the whole valley, but that includes all the farms, etc., etc.
So very agricultural or mining?
Totally agricultural. Well, I say totally agricultural. There was the Forestry Commission. People worked for the council on the roads. But back in the 60s, as well, I don't know how many of you'll know. People didn't go away on holiday.
Our producer does, yeah.
People didn't go away on holiday. You stayed in your village. So I think back. I was talking to the kids the other night about it. I said, you forget how protected my upbringing was, and how little we had a caravan on the outskirts of the village, and that was our holiday. My parents were running a guest house. Mum wasn't very well, so we didn't get a chance to go away on holiday, but people rarely went abroad then. Very few people had a car. We probably had one of the first televisions, and in fact 2 or 3 families would come into our house on a Saturday evening and we all sit and watch telly together. So that's the upbringing I had. It was a chapel fearing village. Church played a big part in our community, and I was never terribly spiritual, but our vicar Martin Riley, if you went to church, you all got to go and play badminton afterwards, and we used to make coffee in the church hall. All the people used to congregate in the church hall after the service, and we'd make coffee for everybody with milk powder. It was always full of lumps. It was terrible.
Rushing didn't end till the 1960s, clearly, in Beddgelert.
But you were very much part of a community. Everything was based around the community, and in those days, as I'd say now, you did things as a matter of course because you were just part of the community. My mum, our house was next door to the church. Vicar would call in on his way to his service. He'd stand with his back to the fire, flicking his fag ash, and it would go everywhere but the fire. The mum and nan think it's gone on the carpet again. Anyway, if his wife was awake, there's always a chocolate cake for him to take home for his tea. But you didn't do these things for plaudits or anything. He just did it because you were part of a village. With coffee evenings were regular, the whist drives and stuff like that, and we just all used to
sound like it's very, very different to how I'm sort of experienced life these days, especially. Everything all being very, very localised. That's the keep saying about community, and I get that. Everyone seems to be all in it together.
Yeah.
The holiday there, you spend all the time there with each other.
Oh yeah, it was very much like that, and And so you socialised together. And I crossed all age boundaries. You know, the local pub, every age generation drank together.
That's something I found. And I was just thinking, you know, and I don't know whether you were a part of the community. I imagine you might have also had a heck of a lot of freedom. There's two things that spring to mind when I was a kid. Some is in Anglesey, which is, you know, my love of North Wales comes from. You know, we had 10 square miles of coast and sea that we could do pretty much what we wanted in. So, you know, offshore, 3 miles, age 13, terrified, but it was quite good fun. And then when I moved to London, I had in 3 streets in a small part of London down by the river in the southwest part of it. It was these 3 rows of terraced houses, and it felt like it was almost cut off from the rest of the world apart from when I went to work. And it was lots of different age groups, different ethnicities, and we did, you know, you'd walk into somebody else's house, you'd have a cup of tea, you'd have a drink, there'd be it wasn't insular, but it was cosy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
we knew what was going on, but we kind of quite self-supporting.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice feeling.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it was what it was. You know, we didn't regard ourselves as insular in any way. It's just that's the way life was, and we just embraced it. And then in '69, when Charles was made Prince of Wales, aside of all the politics with it, but all the villages and hamlets in throughout Wales, really, I suppose, were asked to put on carnivals, sports days, etc., etc. And so, you know, a big social scene in Beddgelert changed then, and we put on this great carnival. We had sports days, then they had fell races down mountains, you know, so everyone looked forward to that every year. And even now, you know, I'm sure you probably feel the same with school sports days, but you smell cut grass, it just takes me straight back to putting the sports days together.
Hay fever.
I've never suffered from it.
And truly down, and then feeling a bit sleepy.
But thing is, though, you're right, Mark. I mean, I did have total freedom. You know, we ran a guest house, busy guest house, and...
Were you cooking at this
I
stage?
wasn't cooking, I was just a little
Thank
kid.
God.
I just ate the food and helped my mum clear her up. But, you know, all the guests that stayed became aunts and uncles, became relatives, even though they weren't. You knew, we used to call them the Blackberry people in September. So you knew who the Clarks and Normans were coming then. So we knew them all. But, you know, during the holidays... we'd have breakfast and she'd turf us out, and that's it. You wouldn't be seen until tea time. And I don't know if it concerned them, worried them, because there weren't the means of communication in those days. But I think you just didn't worry so much now, because we've got all these means of communication. But I think people get you know, strung up about things so much more than they did in those days. And there were still, you know, strange characters around, believe me. You know, I remember some of them. But anyway, it's
there's a feeling, isn't there, that, you know, even I remember being upside down about a mile offshore. I'm quite young, with a friend, and we were upside down for about an hour and a half. But I knew that we'd be okay, because at some point someone would either come out or they'd call a lifeboat. But there's generally you feel like, I think you feel like it yourself. Whether that makes you more of a risk taker, I don't know. But it's almost like being raised by a village, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just a couple of people that are doing it. You've got people looking out for you.
It's like a sense of security.
Yeah, exactly.
That you get from that.
There is that African saying, it takes a village to make a child, and there's nothing truer. You know, there really isn't. I mean, there was a family, the Hugheses, slightly notorious, but 11 of the kids all lived in this council house. But I spent my whole childhood with the Hugheses. I used to love it.
Did you adopt the name?
I could have
your stage name?
No,
Steve Hughes.
I adopted the mucky face that went with it. And I do remember this famous Welsh folk duo came to the local chapel, Tony Ecoloma. They now run a guest house.
Tony what?
Tony Ecoloma, they were called.
Real name, do you think, or was that?
Oh no, proper name.
Proper name.
Yeah, because they run a hotel in Blackpool now, and Welsh people go and stay at Tony Ecolom's hotel, and we all queued up for a kiss from Eloma at the end, and all the Hugheses queued up first, and I was at the back, and when she got to me, she says, "I'm not kissing him. He's got a mucky face." But the Hughes, I had such a wonderful time. I used to go around for Sunday dinner, and the older ones, there was probably 3 of the older kids would get the meat.
Yeah.
Down to me and the other lads, we just get the potatoes and gravy, but it felt great. And sugar sandwiches, it was wonderful. So the thing is, I always had that sense of real sense of community and freedom. And then it was in this sort of early 80s. It's
almost a kind of juxtaposition, isn't it? It's security and complete freedom at the same time.
Yeah,
it's almost like a paradox.
Well, it's the way the world has changed and what we're so much more aware of. That, again, I wasn't a parent then to know what was going on. But everything, I know, and I know our generations talk about this, but everything did seem so much simpler. You had television, 2 channels if you're lucky, and we used to march around. During the interlude at the beginning, if you remember that, there was music before the programme started in the morning.
It was a test card at the end of the night as well. Yeah.
We'd march around.
You were going to bed too late, Dave.
I was.
My sister and I'd march around the chair, dun 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 dun. For about 5 minutes before the programme started. And I say to the kids, I was doing the show. And I suggested to the director that I said, could the kids watch this history of Wales in small segments, say 5 minutes? Of course they could. I said, because I do recall when I was a child, Batman was on television. You had 5 minutes every night, so you had so much to look forward to. Whereas now you can just watch it all. That sort of
the kind of sense of longing is almost kind of dissipated, hasn't it? It's kind of you'd look forward to something. The journey there would be 2 hours, but you kind of be almost overwrought with excitement. But it was
do you remember going to the beach and you'd look out the car and think, sand? I can see sand.
I can see the sea. I can see the sea.
Oh yeah.
I looked forward to Anglesey for probably 11 months and 1 week that we weren't there to get there, and it was that last week was the longest week ever. But it was almost like a delicious feeling of expectation. And when you got there, it was that, and it was that just sense of community, and it was incredible. And I think that's when I went to London. It was just so lovely to find that again in my 30s.
Well, you see, that's what you've hit the nail on the head there. That I still believe when people say there's no such thing as community. I think community's always there.
It is.
You got to find it if you want it, and you've got to find it. But it is there. People still love to socialise together, do things together.
So when you came here to Whitchurch, which I'm not. Tell us when it was, but is that something that you? Because I found I've met a few people, and I don't know. You are. I think you are quite inspirational. But I found that there is a view that if you're not sure about something, or if it's not quite, you can change it. And there is a. You like your letter P, don't you, Steve?
Oh, I do.
Powerful, positive, proactive change. What did you say earlier on the card, Dave? It's perfect.
Yeah,
Pronto.
perfect. Pronto.
Yeah.
I don't know about being so pronto.
But so when you came here,
Brega.
What stage of life you in, and what made it all happen?
Right.
Why?
Two things. We meet people in life.
Was it the drugs?
Occasionally. No, but it was in in the early 80s. A pal of mine who was run a pub in Bethgelert for donkey's years, Alan Hughes, came back to the village, and proud Welshman from very Welsh background, but very broad-minded. He'd been out in the world and done things, and he loved his sport. But we got together. We made a real bonded friendship, and during the mid-80s, the village carnival was slowly waning. The majorettes and the brass band, but people were losing interest in. So we completely turned the carnival on its head.
So it was the drugs?
It was. It may as well have been drugs. But we formed this group called the Snowdonia Billies. Bunch of lads used to meet in a pub, get drunk, start raising a bit of money for charity. And so we decided we'd take on the carnival. And he probably wouldn't be allowed to do this anymore, but one of our mates, Mike Webber, dressed as the White Queen. No, he was the Dark Queen and I was the Light Queen. He was going along on this float, waving to everybody. I then ran up the street and said, I'm the real Queen. So I jumped on, and we'd had costumes made with Velcro, so we ripped each other's costumes off and threw bags of flour at the judges, and it changed the carnival from there on in. And
so anarchic, chaotic hell.
Total maverick. It was anarchy. And we started introducing all sorts of bands. We put on this tropical evening, had steel bands, which in the 80s they'd never seen in Bethgelert. And I always remember this one occasion. There was a field at the back of my house, and we had this flatbed lorry, beautiful evening like tonight, and we had the steel band playing from the Midlands. There were phase one. We've actually had them at Blackberry Fair, and they were playing, and these students, there was about 50 or 60 of them. And we had a great committee at the time. They were pretty laid back and liberal about everything. And I kept giving them 20 quid, saying, give that to the band. Tell them to keep playing. Tell them to keep playing. And because it was just a great party atmosphere. And that's where, the seeds were sown for me of the joy of partying and having a really good time. That's crucial. The fun element to all of this is crucial. So that happened. And, I won't go into all the graphic detail of all the things that we did, but we did some crazy stuff. We made some money. We lost some money, we had great times. I've always said you're either in the stars or in the mud. There's no grey bit in the middle. And then I left. I went off through sadness and turmoil of my family, but I managed to move to Manchester in 1990, determined to get out of Bethgelert before I was 30, went to drama school, studied there for 3 years, then lived in Manchester for nearly 11 years. Probably I felt my most vulnerable and lost when I graduated from drama school, and I sat in a lovely living room in Altrincham looking out the window thinking, so what happens now? Because I had no work,
no security, no community,
nobody. Yeah, exactly. I didn't know anybody, and bless him, it was my neighbour Ken, who was in the building game. He pulled me out of it and said, "Come on," and I laboured on building sites with Ken, and he was just a great, really down to earth guy. And in fact, I took Ken back to Bethgelert, and they absolutely loved Ken. And he sort of broke the mould for me, and it gave me back my self confidence. That's what I was losing. I'd lost my self-confidence because I went to drama school thinking I was going to be the next Richard Burton, and then reality kicks in when you kick back out again. You know, you mollycoddle through drama school, and then bit by bit I started applying for work and started getting work, which is what I'd wanted to do. I'd been in amateur theatre back in North Wales, and again I'd had this wonderful mentor, Hulena Williams. She was an amazing lady. She encouraged me. So, like I said, I started getting bits of television work.
When you say she encouraged you,
yeah,
what was it that you needed, and how did she?
Well, she saw that I had something, and she said, "Stephen, you must pursue this. You must pursue this." So I thought, because lots of people dream about becoming actors and singers and what have you. And I remember the very first day at drama school, the drama tutor saying, "You're not here because you want to do acting, you're here because you need to. You've got to get it out of your system." And they said to me on the first day, "So what were you before this, Steve?" I said I was a chef. He said, "Keep cooking." And I have. But
whoa, don't give up your day job sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
But I have no regrets. 30 years on, I'm still dabbling in it. I've had some relative exciting jobs. I went to Greenland, did an advert out in Greenland, and I've worked out.
Was that Let America Come In? I think I've seen that.
No, very much Keep Them Out. No, I was this fisherman. I was this trawler captain aboard this trawler, obviously, and we're at 10 o'clock at night, and they wanted icebergs floating behind us, which is what they got. It was fantastic. But I do remember the breakdown said a fisherman with hair waving in the wind. Well, if you look at my hair, I've hardly got any. So anyway, when I got the recall,
it's waving. Goodbye.
They took me into the middle of Manchester. They took me into an Afro wig shop. They kept giving me these wigs, and my flat coat says, "Right, go outside." They take a photograph. It was a Russian advert, I hasten to add, and they kept emailing this picture to Russia. No, different colour. So I'd have these Afro wigs. And anyway, cut long story short, they took me to this proper wig shop. It wasn't a shop as such. She was an artist. She was a wig artist. I hate. Anyway, she put these two hair pieces on. She fitted them on. She took about 5-10 minutes to do it. She says, "Of course, you'll have to do this yourself." I said, "I've got to do it myself." He says, "Yeah, I can't come with you." I says, "I'm in the middle of the Arctic Ocean with icebergs floating around, and I've got to put these two hair pieces on."
Just saying that on the wig thing, when I was working in Manchester, I remember going out for my haircut, my fortnightly haircut, which I would to stop my hair going quite afro, which it used to do. And I was there for about an hour and a half, getting more and more worried about my diminishing lunch hour. And the guy just came out of the chair and he said, "I'm really sorry about this." And he was about 27, the poor guy, and he'd had a wig fitted, and when they cut the side of his hair, they had to blend all of his hair into the wig. So it's complex, clearly. So I can understand the Russians finding it difficult. And the Russians always like to do a good job, don't they?
Oh yes, yeah,
absolutely.
But it was it's one of the many crazy jobs I've had down the years, but I never thought I'd end up doing. Then kick forward to the millennium, and that back in 1999, we had in the years previous to that started a celebration on the village bridge of Bethgelert for New Year's Eve, and thankfully 30-something years on, it's still going. A new generation are running it now.
It's a long New Year's Eve party, that.
Oh, it's great.
30 years of it.
Well, in 1999, S4C, Welsh channel, television channel, agreed to film community parties all across Wales.
Nice.
Well, then the millennium bug kicked in. Forget what else happened, but bit by bit, all these parties dropped off. But Bethgelert stuck with it. And there was about 70 of us involved in this. And on New Year's Eve, 1999, in Bethgelert, we'd had torrential rain, and it all happens right on the river. We watched the river come up, we watched the river go down. We had a Snowdonia, we had Sony, we had one of their big digital clocks that we'd hired, and hundreds and thousands of people around the bridge. And believe it or not, the BBC turned up.
Did you say hundreds of thousands?
Hundreds and thousands, not hundreds of thousands.
The sweets, right? Okay.
And the BBC said, "Oh, we do the short straw. We got Beth Geller." I said, "Well, we'll show you." And anyway, because of the rain, the rest of the world was celebrating the millennium, and Beth Geller had 10 minutes to go because the poppies were a bit slow, or they'd either gone too slow, they'd just gone. But nevertheless, we danced all night on that bridge.
Ironically, it was Wales and the Great Western Railway that ensured that we had one time zone in the UK, but actually Beth Geller managed to retain its special status of its own time zone.
It does.
It's a nice story.
And it's very, very often very soggy. Anyway, like I say, we danced on that village bridge all night. The police came, the police went, the police came back dressed as clowns, the police went.
Can't beat them, join them.
Exactly. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, the group was sat up on the mountain and watched the sunrise. And then a local artist had made this fabulous angel. And it had big hands. Hands did look rather farmer-like on a great big scaff tower. We ran out of time to make the wings work, so I just put 2 great big pieces of 2x1 with some ripstop nylon. And I said to Jen, you've got to understand. But I said to Jenny, the artist, next time we celebrate, I said those wings will work. We also had a red dragon.
Were you expecting flight?
Actual, yeah.
Well, if the weather,
Jesus Christ! Oh, literally, Jesus Christ!
If the weather had continued, it would have. But we also had another scaff tower with these big oil drums. We made a red dragon, and I mean, you wouldn't get away with this now. But I
thought you were about to say you'd never guess it wasn't a real dragon. Is that realistic?
Well, we beamed a red light up through the scaff tower, and again with 2x1 and Visqueen, we made these giant wings.
What's Visqueen?
Visqueen's a plastic that you put in. They use it on building sites to put as a subsurface.
Okay. I should know that.
Anyway, we beamed this red light up through it, and it caught the electric wires, you see. And someone came around and says, the heat, it's making the wires melt. And all it was red light. But anyway, my mate Tony, he was the knight in charge of the flame. And there's a hot air balloon company, I don't think they still existed, down in Oswestry, was it Lindstrad?
Pierre Lindstrom.
That's it.
Fella, basically, they didn't quite make landfall, did they? When Richard Branson and Lindstrom came across the Atlantic, that was it.
I don't know if they still exist.
They're not in the air anymore, but I know what you mean.
Well, anyway, they lent us a burner, which was incredible. You'd never get away with this now. And so I said to Tony, I says, when Land of My Fathers goes, we had all the national anthems, because I think the Rugby World Cup had been on that year in the UK. It's a wonderful medley of all the anthems. When's he let it off? In Land of Hope and Glory. he let rip, but honestly, this flame shot across the river. It was incredible.
So you've got a Bunsen burner, fake dragon that's huge,
it's
made of oil
fake.
drums.
It's very artistically created.
An angel. You're 10 minutes behind everyone else, and the Welsh dragon goes off to Land of Hope and Glory.
Yeah, it was chaos.
It sounds absolutely brilliantly chaos.
But we also had a Scotsman on a zip rope from the top of a hotel window. A 70-year-old Scotsman, wonderful guy, Adam Easton, winched across the river, and all the local lads had this rope, and it starts bending in the middle, and he starts concentrating up and down. Poor old Adam. How he survived, I don't know, but you know he loved it. He loved every second of it. Anyway, jumping forward to the following year, as I said, I'd said to Jenny, the artist, we'll get those wings working. I got in touch with a company from Mahogany Carnival Company from Harlesden in London to help us make these wings work. Well, the couple that came up was a lady called Clary Solandi. She was a designer, and the engineer was called Speedy. He was an old Jamaican taxi driver from London. But
I love is you've got this group of people who are pulling together the most ridiculously diverse resources through basically the British love of taking humorous insanity very, very seriously.
Oh yeah, we did. I tell you, we were proud. But it wasn't brilliant art. It was never intended to be. It was the fact we stuck together. We all held hands that night. Well, the following New Year's Eve, as I said, we had Mahogany turn up, and they'd made the costumes for the Millennium Dome. We didn't know this until they came. Anyway, we were sitting in the pub, and sure enough, they bought these roach poles. They bought stuff they'd used in the Millennium Dome. And I'm sat in the pub with Speedy and Clary on the Saturday night. I said, look, we agreed on 300 quid for the weekend. I says, we can't afford all these kits. And this is where the word comes in, because Speedy says, Steve, positivity breeds positivity.
Right.
And
So it's all Speedy's fault. All the
Speedy.
it
pigs.
all
That's
comes
on.
from that, because he basically said enthusiasm and passion goes so far, and they saw what we were trying to achieve and they wanted to help us. And sure enough, that following New Year's Eve, the stars were out, the snow on the mountains at midnight, albeit they went up the wrong way, these wings unfurled, and we just looked. I said, God, we've become part of the backdrop.
This is God saying powerful, passionate
Yeah,
positivity
yeah.
produces
And
permanent.
It just shows
Results.
what passion can achieve.
Yeah.
So jump forward to just post foot and mouth. The
Foot and mouth or COVID?
no, it was foot and mouth.
Definitely foot and mouth.
There was a tourism association in Bethgelder, and they asked me back to put on an event to help market the valley. And I said, well, hang on a second. When we used to do the carnivals, it was done for the benefit of the community. The spin-off was it brought business. Now you're asking the same people to do it for business, focused directly on business, which doesn't seem terribly fair. Then I met another great guy called Bill Henderson, who was a sustainability officer for Snowdonia National Park. And he came along and he said, right, well, why don't we put on a sustainability fair? So we called it Golug 2020 Vision. And it was about defining what we mean by community and where people's roles fit into a community. And he wanted to say this is for the businesses to see where they actually fit into the picture. And we basically had a 2-day celebration of everything about that valley, about that village, about the culture, about sustainability. And it was just an incredible event. The following year we did it in Harlech. And then it's sort of, we planned to make it into sort of a nomadic event that you could take around from valley to valley in the area. But then Bill moved away to Findhorn in Scotland, and it sort of slightly dissipated and came to an end. Then I'd moved to Whitchurch, and a couple of local
Big theatre scene here, isn't there?
But big theatre
Is that what bought you?
No, it
The
was.
bright lights.
I've done it once. There's no disrespect to any of my pals. That they're a great bunch of people, but I'm trying to stay as a professional.
Love.
But anyway, Sarah and Nikki, I think it was, were aware of there was a lot of negativity around the town at the time. Shop windows are being kicked in.
When was this?
This would be around the 2006-2007 period.
So when did you come?
You hadn't started then, David. I don't think.
No, I hadn't.
I mean, Morris was there. I forget who else was. Oh, it was John, little John.
Yes, I know. John he comes along and has a cup of coffee in the cafe.
Does he still come along?
Yeah, he comes along
And
pretty
what
much every
else do
week.
you sell now, Dave?
Oh, we sell cakes, by the way.
Excellent.
You know he's eating
Sponsored
cakes.
What cakes are those?
Oh,
Producer
Vermeulen's
interruption.
cakes.
So where was I now? Oh, it was after Nikki and
Come and get your cakes at Vermeulen's. Vermeulen's cakes.
How much are they,
at
Dave?
Dave Scufford. They're very, very reasonably
How much
priced.
are they?
Oh, but I know, £1, £2. It's all for charity,
Not
don't
really
it? Our
desperate for
ambulance.
sponsors.
is he
No.
allowed adverts?
How do you think we're paying your massive fee, Steve? You said you weren't doing this for charity. You said you wanted at least 300 quid. So we have to make some money somehow. And rent the boats, bring the beers. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
It is a great venue, this, I must admit.
It is,
I
isn't
love this. It's very chilled out feel. So Nikki and Sarah wanted to do something as young mums with young families. So we decided to do saying, well, let's do a Christmas market. So we put on a Christmas market. I built a natural woodland, sort of, it was all birch trees, and we've got an old shed.
I love the irony of that. I built a natural woodland.
Yes, well, it was literally in the old market hall. At the time, I had this character called Alf the Elf. I was doing storytelling, and they let me out on Wixell Moss to cut little birch trees down.
They let me out.
They said, yeah.
You're not going to get out of here.
Well, you want to see me as Alf the Elf? You worry about drugs. People have to say, who needs drugs when you've got Alf the Elf?
Well, indeed.
It was a bit like Dylan off Magic Roundabout. Do you remember? You're probably too young to remember Dylan.
Steve, you keep harking
Do you
back
remember
to
Dylan?
kind of 15 years before us now.
Producer
I need to use a
interruption
new
here.
moisturiser.
Producer's 65, so a bit
That's
older,
it, same
slightly
age.
older than Steve.
Now,
so
you two have got so much in common.
yeah, I do remember Dylan and all the other things Steve's talking about.
Perfect. Well, that's one listener that knows. And he's even on board.
So, anyway, cut a long story short, I put an advert out for a shed because I wanted to make a grotto in amongst the trees. You
Can
see.
I just, having spent a long time in advertising, I'm wishing I could have got that done. What's the brief? I need a shed to make with a natural woodland built for an elf called Alf to entertain the kids in Christmas.
I did it above,
in 10 words.
I did it above Lorna's house in town, in a room upstairs.
It's gone downhill since then, hasn't it? Wow.
It's not the same, you know. And the first year I did it, I built a hobbit hole in the trees.
Jesus.
And parents would bring the kids up. I became a glorified Christmas creche. They go off Christmas shopping like half an hour later thinking, how many more stories I've got to tell these kids? And then the parents would come in to pick the kids up and say, well, an old elf's got to make a living too. Happy Christmas. And they'd just walk away. So the following year I thought, right, I'll make some money this year. So I did mulled wine. And then yeah, well, it made them sleep. I went to bed early. But I put this mulled wine on in a little ante-room next to the room with 10 stories. And on one occasion, I totally forgot about it. About 2 hours later, I thought, the mulled wine? I opened the door and it was like a mulled wine sauna. There's like steam pouring out. How it didn't set off the fire alarms, I'll never know. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years.
I'm just thinking still, there's a picture coming to my mind. And I think we're all big fans of Father Ted. But do you remember that episode where Father Jack is just in the creche with a load of kids and he's drunk?
Oh no.
And he's just teaching them to swear with a letterbox. And that's just exactly what I'm thinking about your creche.
Well, sweet boozy steam.
I do remember one occasion I had this string going from the edge of the shed to the door with tin cans. I was trying to be sustainable, you see. And I had tea
Drink them, keep them, use them as decorations and music chimes.
Tea lights inside, you see, and each time the tea light went out, put new
That's
tea
a fire
lights in.
hazard as well, brilliant.
Oh,
And
God,
with the booze
Dave,
teams.
that doesn't come into it, believe me. And this fella came in with his family and he got this beautiful moleskin jacket on. And always, and this is magic, I shouldn't really reveal this, you have to put your left finger in the air and you go round in a circle and then you enter Christmas, which is Alf's world. So I said, right, everyone put the left
This
finger
could
in
be
the air.
another episode
And
in
so,
itself.
Here we go, and off we went round in a circle. Well, his left shoulder caught the can, and the wax poured down his shoulder. And as I thought, God, no! And his right shoulder went round, and he's fallen. And I just sat there for about half an hour, telling stories, thinking he hasn't seen his coat yet. Anyway, later that day, I was in town, and I had to run across the other side of the street because he came up the street with a different jacket. I thought I must have ruined his jacket. But wonderful tales, wonderful experience doing that. As I said, we put on 2 Christmas markets, and there was this fabulous couple that used to run a market stall in town, Valerie and Dave Reed. And Dave was quite a character, I hasten to add. They lived over on the canal by the horse and jockey there.
And a little canal boat as well, did they?
No, they didn't have a canal boat, but he was part of the Saturn project. Is it still going? Saturn project was Dave.
Saturn came through today
Did it really?
along the canal. Yeah.
Is that in a boat?
Yes, it
this case,
is.
right.
It's a butty, actually.
So I was
To
thinking
be
you had,
technical.
I was thinking you had rocket engineers involved in your various goes on as well, which would have been taking the biscuit, but there we go.
Well, I could tell you about the carnival and we blew each other up, but that's another,
We'll come on to that.
occasion.
And I think actually this is so basically you have had the perfect training, which is going to segue into a bit about the Blackberry Fair. So anarchic chaos, alcohol, some other questionable circumstances, odd characters, burning things down, police. Anything else, Dave, that I can add to this, which is perfect?
Possibly.
a heap of fun.
A whole heap of fun, all held together.
Yeah.
Again, with a lot of fun.
Yeah,
And lots of peas.
and lots of peas.
Right, we'll come back to that.
The lock-in is a conversation on a canal boat, often accompanied by beer. Every couple of weeks, we'll talk to someone from Whitchurch who has contributed to our community, who has a story, who makes the town special. They could come from any age, any background, any walk of life, but they embody the spirit of this fantastic, sometimes overly modest little market town. So, if you have a story, something to say, or know someone that does, we'd love you or them to get on board and tell us what floats your boat, gets your engine running, makes you tick. You get the picture.